Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. In this episode, I'm joined by Kevin Burns, best-selling author and founder of the People Work Supervisor Academy. Kevin brings a powerful and provocative perspective. You can't build a safety culture through the safety department. Instead, it lives and dies with your frontline supervisors, the one role that touches every metric that matters, from engagement and turnover to productivity and safety itself. We explore why most supervisors are set up to fail, what careful leadership actually looks like on the ground, and why focusing directly on safety can sometimes be the very thing holding organizations back. This is a practical, thought-provoking conversation about leadership, culture, and what really drives safer performance. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, post about it on social media, and of course, hit subscribe. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Kevin, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Christian, my pleasure.
Good stuff. So you have got a really interesting background. I thought I'd start with this. 20 years in broadcasting before moving into this crazy world called safety and risk. What was it that kind of pulled you into the world of safety and frontline leadership?
Well, I got to say, it's not a straight line. And, you know, as many of the folks in safety often say, I got into it by accident, but not the kind that, you know, you tell a sad story from the stage. So when I was in broadcasting, towards the end of my broadcasting career, I moved over into the broadcast sales department. We ended up going to a sales seminar where our general manager had made a trade with the sales trainer saying, if I can send some of my people to attend your seminar, we'll put some ads for your public seminar on our radio station. And that's exactly what happened. So we ended up there, and it was awful. It's probably the best way to put it. And at the first break, the three coworkers that I had worked with in the sales department all looked at me and said, "You could do this so much better than this guy." Yeah. And it kind of planted a seed, right? A few years later, I published my first book back in 1997, 29 years now, going into my 29th year. Wow. And it was a sales training book, and sales training led to management customer service, and management customer service led to leadership, and leadership led to safety leadership because of one company I had done a leadership session for, oil and gas company, and the CEO said, "Great message. We should bring this to all of our people, but the only time we ever talk to them is at a safety stand down. Can you make your leadership message apply to safety with the help of our safety team?" And I did, and we ended up going, 4 different cities, 4 different locations, 4 different teams, and the CEO at the end said, "It's the most fun I've had talking about safety ever." And within 4 or 5 years after that, 100% of my revenue was coming from safety presentations. So that's how I ended up here. I can't hear you, Christian.
Apologies about that. I put myself on mute because I coughed. Long and winding road, as you say, and a really interesting background. And one thing that strikes me as you were telling that story is something I've spoken about before, which is I often draw an analogy between safety and sales. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're a really good sales director, let's say, you're not being driven by the outcome of the sales you're achieving. You're actually being driven by all of the inputs and all of the time and effort and the focus you're putting into the things that are going to make things happen at the end. And I think safety, in terms of leading versus lagging, could learn quite a lot from sales.
You're right in that regard. There are a lot of parallels between sales and safety. And I know in our Frontline supervisor training program, one of the modules we have actually talks about selling the safety program. And, most supervisors get terrified when they find out we're going to have to sell a safety program. Yeah, but don't worry. It's actually a whole lot easier than you think.
Mm.
And sales to me is just helping people get what they want,
Yeah.
right? And so when we try to get people to buy into safety, we're essentially in a sales process. If we want to get somebody to buy into safety, somebody has to sell something in order for somebody to buy. And really, I think this is the part where safety for 56 years or so now has done a disservice to itself. It's aligned itself with consequence and punishment and rules and regulation and process procedure, when if it had just aligned itself with how does this make my life better, as an answer to what's the benefit of me getting behind safety as an employee. Uh, if we'd have done that right from the get-go, we would be so far ahead of where we are right now. And I think, honestly, think about it yourself, Christian. The house you live in, the vehicle you drive, how often you go out for dinner, where you vacation, whether or not your children are going to go to university, all depends on your ability to generate revenue. And if you take chances with safety, you put the revenue stream in jeopardy. And so, the benefit for an employee is, okay, so I get to take something home, right? We talk a lot about the benefit of a safety gets when we perform well in safety, but we never talk about what the employee's benefit is. And as soon as an employee sees their win, they're in.
Yeah, I like that, and that's a good phrase as well. That you've a little coined phrase you've got there as well, which I'm a fan of. So thank you for that. What's interesting is with your background, you kind of, I guess, have come at safety as a people problem, whereas often people are looking at this as a safety problem, and then they realize later it's a people problem. So you've got quite a different perspective, I suppose.
Yeah, we talk a lot about process and procedure and rules and regulation, but we never name the person who, and I'm not saying as a way to assess blame,
No.
but if there's a weakness in the process or in the procedure, whose position is that? Specifically, because if we don't name it specifically, we can't fix it specifically. And then we're going back and re-looking at our processes, our procedures. But if we could identify the one point where it breaks down, the one person, and it could be something as simple as a brand new supervisor who worked under an old supervisor, and that old supervisor treated every safety meeting as a box checking exercise. And that's what the entire crew learned. When that guy retired and the new person took the position over, because they weren't given, the necessary people skills, they just go off of the example of the last supervisor they had, and it continues to treat it as a box checking exercise. And that's where it turns out that's the position where safety falls down. And until we fix that one person, it's going to continue to underperform. And, we see plenty of conversations on LinkedIn that talk about process and procedure. And I keep trying to bring the conversation back to, yeah, but who specifically? So that we can fix that person specifically.
Yeah, yeah.
Some days it's a futile argument.
Yeah. When did that kind of become so obvious to you, the fact that we're sort of setting frontline people and supervisors up often to fail? I mean, where was that sort of light bulb moment?
Well, I'm going to guess 10 plus years ago. I'd say probably closer to 15 to 18 years ago. So, little story. I was giving a speaking presentation at a safety stand down for an oil well drilling company in northern Canada. And the management team and I had flown into a rural airport, and we jumped into our rental cars and drove about 90 minutes or so to the middle of nowhere, just a crossroads. And at one of the corners was a community hall. And that was the location where the safety stand down was going to be. They had a whole bunch of drilling rigs working in the area, and the plan was the buses crews would go by, pick up all the employees, bring them to the community hall. We'd stand down, talk about safety for 2 hours, have a big outdoor barbecue lunch, and then put everybody back on the buses, send them back to their respective workplaces. And while we're waiting for the crews to arrive, pardon me if this is a long story, but while we're waiting for the crews to arrive, I hear the management team talk about one of their rig bosses or rig managers that had simply walked up to his boss one day, handed in his resignation, and just a few hours later was across the street working with another drilling company, running one of their rigs same day. And the managers who had lost this guy like 3 months before were livid still. The F-bombs were flying in the hall, and I didn't get what the big deal was. It was like 3 months ago, guys, get over it. And the safety manager obviously saw the confused look on my face and pulled me aside and says, Kevin, have you got a sense of what we're talking about here? I said, you lost a rig boss like 3 months ago. I don't get the big deal. He goes, yeah, you're right, Kevin. We did. We lost him 3 months ago. But over the last 3 months, every member of his team have all handed in their resignation and followed him to the other company. I said, you had 10 guys walk off the job to follow their old boss? He said, yeah. I said, well, damn, we need to make more supervisors like that.
Yeah.
And that began it. And so in 2016, I published my first book, People Work, The Human Touch in Workplace Safety. And it was really clear, and that the whole premise of the book makes the argument that, listen, as much as we're tied up in process and procedures, nothing works without people. And it's that connection between people that makes people want to keep each other safe. And so, long story short, that's how we got there.
Yeah, yeah. No, that definitely resonates with me. I mean, in my field of slips and trips, people kind of feel that they're infallible themselves. You know, it won't happen to me. It won't happen to me. But if you can get them to buy into their actions, keeping one of their friends and colleagues safe, that is sort of often is how it clicks in their mind, and they'll do that extra cleaning, or they'll take that bit of extra time or whatever, not to protect themselves because they think it'll never happen to them, but to look after the people that they're working with. So yeah, I can definitely sort of see how that would work well.
You know, it's especially when you've got members of the team that have worked together a long time, and the longer they work together, the more likely they are to know members of the family.
Yeah.
Right. And there is that avoiding guilt moment that I could have done better housekeeping and your husband wouldn't be in hospital today.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have that conversation. Right. So there is that guilt avoidance. But yes, you're right. It does drive those behaviors. The longer people get to work together, the more they get to know each other, the more willing they are to put themselves out to protect each other. I absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah, definitely. So Kevin, you've said something quite provocative. You can't build a safety culture through the safety department. So what do people misunderstand or get wrong when they hear that?
Well, because it has the word safety in it, it's supposed to be the exclusive domain of the safety department. And yet, my fervent belief is that you can't build a safety culture without your frontline supervisors. And it's the frontline supervisors that touch every metric that a company measures at some point. And it's impossible, in my estimation, to build a strong safety culture when you've got high levels of turnover, when you've got low levels of engagement, when you've got productivity issues, when you have got low adoption to change. All of these things are metrics that are going to weigh on the culture. Because you can't, everything has to be firing on all cylinders in order for that safety culture to move. So is the safety department responsible for production? Is it responsible for engagement? Well, no. The answer is no. The frontline supervisor is responsible for all of that. And that's the reason why, the safety department is not responsible for building of the safety culture. If you've got metrics that are underperforming, you won't have one exclusive metric that is overperforming.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And is safety culture actually the wrong target anyway?
Well, I think culture is, in essence, how we do things around here.
Yeah.
And so I got asked the question years ago, what's the easiest way to measure the level of a culture of an organization? And my very quick answer was to measure the amount of laughter on the floor.
I like that.
And, right now, think about this. And I'm not talking about that nervous laughter. We've probably all worked in a workplace like that. But I'm talking about genuine laughter where people are enjoying their work and they're having fun. And when people are enjoying their work, it's hard to enjoy your work when people are getting hurt, or when equipment is getting damaged, or people are exposed to near misses. That's not fun work. And it's difficult to laugh. But if you've got a team that works well with their supervisor, and the supervisor recognizes their role, they're the head coach, nothing more than that. And no one has more, no one's more valuable on the job than anyone else. And that includes the supervisor. We're just all playing different roles with different levels of responsibility. And when we get that, everyone's working well together, it's automatically building a good culture. And so really, the collective culture of an organization depends on the individual pockets of culture, crew to crew, team to team. And if you can get all of your supervisors aligned on really the basic thinking about what my role is in all of this, you can build those cultures with 10 members of your team, and the next supervisor can build their culture with their 10 members of their team, and it doesn't take very long for it to spread right through and become just how we do things around here.
Yeah. Because the phrase of safety culture, sometimes if you bolt the word safety on it, A, as you say, it then seems to be under the domain of safety, but B, it sometimes makes people sort of switch off. So I guess that begs the question, is it possible that sometimes by sort of focusing directly on safety, we often fail to actually improve safety?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting that you bring that up. So let me draw you the parallel the other way. So I'm a car salesman. I'm brand new to the car industry. I'm looking for a quick primer on how to sell cars. And I go to the bookstore and I'm looking at all the books on sales, how to be a great salesperson, how to sell. And then I see this one book, How to Sell Cars Fast. That's the book I'm taking because it used the word cars. Mm-hmm. Same idea when we talk about safety. We can talk about culture all we want, and all of a sudden everybody goes deaf because it doesn't specifically identify who this is referring to. But the moment we add the word safety to it, all of a sudden now safety departments perk up, frontline supervisors perk up. We know exactly what we're talking about. Culture is nebulous. Safety culture is a lot more specific. And yes, you're right in the same regard. By tacking the word on, does it change the meaning? No, not really. It just makes people listen more.
Yeah. So would you say, in your experience, that, bearing in mind what we said, that it can't be all driven by safety, the safety professional, does the safety department sometimes kind of unintentionally make things worse, even when they've got good intentions?
No, I don't. I haven't run into that, honestly. But I do think it's possible for a safety department to get tunnel vision. And so safety manager goes to the senior management team looking for money for a safety initiative and doesn't get the money they want for the safety initiative. And then gets back to the floor and says, well, our senior management team doesn't support safety because they didn't get the money, or they didn't see how this one initiative was important. The challenge, of course, is for senior managers. They're looking at a dashboard of 13 to 18 metrics that they're all trying to improve, and safety is one of them. And if the safety manager comes back and says, this project will not only improve safety, and that's a byproduct, but it will also improve 6 or 8 other metrics, then all of a sudden you've got somebody's attention. You're solving 6 or 8 problems with one. And again, that tunnel vision, right? I only know safety and I only need to be concerned about safety. But again, it would come back to something I said earlier, right? If you've got high levels of turnover and high levels of attrition and high levels of absenteeism, you're not going to fix the safety program. It's impossible to do.
Yeah.
So yes, is it the purview of the safety person in that regard? No, but they also need to be aware of what's happening. But safety is not a not a problem unto itself that can be fixed.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's bring this back to talking about specifically the supervisors then. So you kind of said earlier that every sort of important metric, engagement, turnover, productivity, safety, all come back to that same person, the frontline supervisor. So why is it that role is then so sort of disproportionately influential?
Well, there's going to be some married folks that are not going to like this analogy, but when you really break it down on a per waking hour basis, an employee spends more time with their supervisor than their spouse.
Yeah.
And so there is no greater influence on worksite productivity or team building or connection or relationship than that relationship between supervisor and frontline employee. And an employee doesn't leave a company, and it's not money that's going to fix a bad supervisor, right? More money to tolerate your bad supervisor is not going to keep you there. I've said this for years. People don't leave for $1.50 an hour. They leave because, and the exit interviews, you'll hear employees say, I have a better opportunity somewhere else. But the question that should be asked is, why were you looking for a job in the first place? And the answer will always come back to, I didn't get along with my boss. And so this is where that relationship is so important, that there's pressure from above the supervisor to get stuff done. Everything that becomes a policy or initiative in senior management needs to be translated into everyday language and understandable for the frontline crew. That's the exclusive purview of the frontline supervisor. That's the job. Here's the challenge though, Christian. Most of these guys were never given the training they need to be exceptional at it. Right? Most supervisors are the rock star employee who became supervisor over. It's like being your top striker and suddenly you're head coach overnight.
Or going back to, and you've actually segued into the question I was going to ask you next, which is what's the problem with this? And it's a bit like if you're going back to sales, you could be the best salesperson and then you get promoted to be the sales manager, but you haven't got a clue how to manage people. You just know how to sell.
Right. And you don't want to be in the office if you're a great salesperson, right? You want to be out on your own, alone. You don't want to be surrounded by people, because I've learned most salespeople are terrible in the minutia of detail. They're great at closing a sale, and you're right, absolutely right. A great performer doesn't guarantee that will translate into great people skills. And that's why we have chosen specifically supervisors and specifically people skills to arm them with, to compensate for what they weren't given when they should have started.
Yeah. And if that sort of does, happen and someone's promoted and then they haven't been given the skills and the training and the support. I mean, how long does it take before the downsides for that sort of start to show up, specifically thinking about safety here?
Okay, so a new supervisor in their position will have about a 2-year trial and error period where they try to find their feet, where they try to find the rhythm for the job. They may never find it, by the way. They'll find something that sort of works for them, but it may be all wrong. And it may be turning over staff, but it's the only way that they found that seems to be comfortable for them. 2 years is a long time to experiment on your people. You're going to turn over a lot of staff. You're going to have productivity issues. You're going to have absentee issues. You're going to have all kinds of issues. While that supervisor, and it's no fault of their own. I mean, we want to shorten that learning time. We've shortened it to 60 days rather than, so 2 months rather than 2 years.
Yeah.
And, for some supervisors who've been doing the job for 30 years, they're still finding that, what they learned 30 years ago doesn't apply today. That we are in a very different market. As our workforce gets younger, the needs and wants of that younger workforce has got to be reflected in the skills of the supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the sorts of signs, the symptoms? What are the things that they're doing wrong on a daily basis, that not because they're bad people, of course, but just because they haven't been taught what to do properly?
Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that overwhelmingly, first-time supervisors struggle with confidence. It
Yeah.
would be the imposter syndrome, right? I'm going to be found out. So let's just say, Christian, this is your first foray into supervisory world. You were the rock star employee. Suddenly now you're in charge, and you find that you're working with a team of people who you and they used to complain about management last Friday. But now it's this Friday, and you are management, and you're the one they're complaining about. And so the difficulty for supervisors to go from being buddy-buddy with, close workmates with some of these folks to now having to critique their performance. And it's in a matter of days. And nobody prepared the supervisor for how to do that without ruining trust.
Yeah.
And so you as a supervisor are just trying to get through the day. Fingers crossed that nothing big blows up for you today, that nothing hard you have to deal with. And you go home and go, okay, got through that one. And you repeat that for another near 700 days. I mean, it's taxing. And it's difficult because it's even more difficult to build a relationship with somebody you're afraid that is going to blow up. That you're going to anger, or they're going to force you to have that tough conversation where you have to pull rank, and you don't want to do that. And there's a set of skills that recognize that, what is my job as a supervisor? Well, if you got made supervisor overnight, here's the clue. You're the new coach. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all. Everything that's in your head, everything institutional knowledge, your job is to now take it out of your head and put it in theirs. That's it. That's the job. And so don't do the work for them. Don't jump in, be a gunslinger. That's what I call it, when the supervisor solves all the problems before any employees have a chance to do it. Give them the skills, build their confidence. The more you build their confidence, the less you have to critique their work. And it is something as simple as just adopting a simple mindset. And this is the place I suggest every supervisor start. And the mindset is this: as a supervisor, my team doesn't work for me. I work for them. My job is to put them in a position to win, to set them up for success. Can I do that every day? And that is the mindset. And so how do you carry that out? One of the ways is, first thing in the morning, there should be the number one item on your agenda is, who on my team needs my help most of all today? And then make a plan to go give that person the team. If you're doing it right, every day it should get harder to find someone to help.
Yeah.
But now you know that you're building the team's capability and their confidence. They depend less on you, so that when you show up in their workspace, and you don't make them come to your office, because that's another mistake that supervisors make. When you go into their workspace, their office, as I call it, they're more prepared to engage in you and show you what they're doing. You've built that confidence. It's just adopting the mindset, recognizing what the role is. It's not to look like a supervisor, Not like you're playing the part of a supervisor in a little theater production. The job is to be the coach. That's it.
Yeah.
Improve their performance.
Mm-hmm. And is that what you mean by careful supervision? That's a
Yeah.
phrase that you've, yeah.
Yeah. So careful really means full of care. And that's, we don't, so it's a double L at the
Yeah.
end of careful, not a
Yeah.
single L.
Yeah.
We want to see more of our supervisors be full of care. And there's three things that supervisors need to care about. First, the quality of the work. That's really important that, we are delivering our best quality. And if we're delivering quality of the work, we don't have a lot of rework. Second thing they need to care about is how they do that work. To me, that's the safety part, right? Do that work safely. Good quality, do it safely. And the third part that they need to care for is the people who do that work.
Yeah.
And when you care about your team, you're prepared to stand up for your team. When you don't have that relationship or that connection with your team, it's harder to protect them. You're more likely as a supervisor to want to protect yourself rather than the team. But build that relationship. And, if you're my senior manager, you're coming to me, Christian. I say, you want a piece of my team, you have to come through me. Anything you have to say to them, you say to me, and I'll relay the message. And I become that buffer. That I don't let you have access to my direct team because you're going to mess up what I'm trying to build here. And it's a part of that building the relationship where it's the same idea as we look after our children, right?
Yeah.
We would not let another parent have that difficult conversation with our child directly. It would come through us.
Yeah.
It really isn't any different.
No. And even that extends to the protection and the safety element, doesn't it? We wouldn't let something, we'd do everything we could to prevent something bad happening to our kids, obviously.
Absolutely. And, we've seen it, and I've seen it, I've seen it in deep rock mining, seen it in railroad where it's generational, right? My daddy was a railroader. His daddy was a railroader. My daddy was a deep rock miner. His daddy was a deep rock miner. And sometimes you see father and son working alongside each other where the father is actually the supervisor because they've just been doing it for so long. So, it'd be difficult for the father to be a completely different person on the job site than they are at home.
Yeah.
And have that first day for their son working alongside them, get home at the end of the day going, who the hell was that guy I worked for today? I didn't recognize him at all, right? And so it's if you're going to work, potentially end up working with your children, you should be the same person on the job as you are off. And that's allowing the true character of who you are, your own values to show up. I often get concerned when I see safety folks posting things on LinkedIn saying, that supervisors are just pawns. They're told what to do. They're told to ignore safety and pick up production as though supervisors are empty vessels with no values of their own. And I've known a lot of supervisors, and boy, they are good people. They have taken on an incredibly thankless job. So I give great kudos, and I will always bow to frontline supervisors. It is not easy work.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. So in safety, we talk a lot about systems and controls and measurement. How do we sort of square that circle between the people first approach and obviously making sure that we're doing all of that kind of stuff as well?
Well, the processes, the regulations, that's the how. The people connection is the why. And how you square it is you can tell people how all day long, but they don't understand why. It's just going to feel like something that's being pushed onto them. And there's always going to be that pushback, right? We resist anything that we feel like we're being forced to do.
Yeah.
But explain to me how this procedure done this specific way benefits me more than doing it my way. I'll listen. And as soon as I see the rationale behind doing it a certain way, oh, I get it. All right, it makes sense to me. Yeah, I get that. All right, I can follow that.
Mhm.
And I mean, it sounds simplified, but it really, this is the part I don't think we've done a great job is explaining the why.
Yeah.
And I mean, Simon Sinek written how many books on this concept about,
Mm.
explain the why, and you'll get buy-in. Without the why, how is just a series of rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And nobody likes rules.
Right.
Nobody likes rules. So then it becomes kind of managing relationships, the balance, I suppose, between relationships and accountability, isn't it? So where have you seen that being done really well, and what are some of the things or some of the signs that that's being done well?
Well, I think when we talk about managing relationships, it actually almost sounds very technical. Um, either so as a supervisor, you have two choices. One, you can be feared or you can be respected.
Hmm.
And we don't fear those we respect, and we don't respect those we fear, right? So, but you're not going to be both. And so, because you're the boss doesn't mean you should try to be the boss. You know you're in charge. They know you're in charge. There's no need to prove that you're in charge.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned the word, you used the term managing relationships, and I don't think it's about managing the relationships. I think it's about creating the relationship. When you have a relationship, you have a best friend, you don't feel like you have to manage that
No.
relationship, right? It's just a person you can call in the middle of the night. A friend is somebody who will help you move. A true friend is someone who will help you move a body. Um, that's my attempted humor, but you get my point, right? There's the best friends. And I think, when we have our crew working with us long enough, it becomes an extension of who we are. I know that the company Tiny Pulse, based out of Seattle, Washington, which has since changed their name, a few years ago surveyed 500,000 people, identifying what people want from their work.
Hmm.
And the number 7 answer was benefits and money.
Right.
There were 6 things that were more important to workers than benefits and money. And all 6 of them, which number 1 was camaraderie and peer motivation. That was number 1, overwhelmingly. All 6 above money and benefits are delivered by supervisors, right? Remember, supervisors without the skills to know that they have the ability to impact these 6 items.
Yeah.
But the camaraderie and peer motivation means that that an employee doesn't want to show up on the job today and feel like an outsider in their own workplace. They want to feel like they belong, like they're
Yeah.
a valued member of the team. Their contribution is equal to everybody else's contribution. Their voice is equal. When they don't feel that equality, they don't feel like they're a member of the team.
Mm.
They don't feel like they have a relationship with the rest of the team. They're an
Mm.
outsider. And so
Yeah.
Tiny Pulse did a little bit deeper dive into that camaraderie piece, and they found out that 70% of the reason people come to work with a smile on their face is because they look forward to the group of people they get to work with. So, we're talking about managing relationships.
Mm.
There's not any management in that relationship. I look forward to going to work. I work with a cool bunch of people. That's just the relationship, period. And until something threatens that or takes that relationship away from me, I look forward to going to work. And I will protect every person who's standing around me because I know they're doing that for me.
Yeah.
We're all committed to it.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I love that. Kevin, something you've spoken about before is the supervisor tax. Could you explain kind of what that means, and then how would we quantify that in a way that executives would sort of take seriously?
Yeah, the supervisor tax is always a fun one. So The supervisor tax starts being paid the moment a supervisor becomes a supervisor without any training. The tax begins that day. So the supervisor will always take the path of least resistance, the one where they're not going to get in trouble, the one where they don't risk stepping out of line or risk, raising the ire of their superiors, which means it's always going to be the safe choice. Now, I don't mean safe in a safety sort of way. It's going to be the lowest risk choice, rather than help my team build a solid reputation. I'm going to be happy just sliding into mediocrity. I'm going to do what everybody else does and nothing more than that. And there's a hazard in that, because employees want to feel like they're part of something special, right? And if they don't, they're going to go somewhere else. That's part of the tax, right? Companies pay when they lose an employee, because now it takes between 6 and 8 months to get that employee up to the same level of productivity the last person left. That's money that's lost. That's the supervisor tax. One example, high levels of attrition, having to work with fewer people on the job today because people just decided to call in sick. Supervisor tax. And because we haven't skilled the supervisors to be able to solve those issues, or to be able to build the relationships that they need to have so that people do look forward to coming to work, we haven't trained them. And many companies look at training supervisors as a tax. And you think about it, right? Well, here's the truth. You're paying for it already. One way or another, you're writing a check. Whether it's not giving your supervisors the skills to go, to be the best they can be, to set them up for success, or by just allowing them to wallow in mediocrity, or even below average. One way or another, it's costing your company. So you decide how you want to pay for that.
Yeah. No, that makes good sense. So if someone joining us today, let's say they're a head of safety director, or they're aspiring to be that in the future, and they want to influence the board, how would you advise them to kind of reposition this conversation about supervisors to enable those better safety outcomes that we all obviously care about?
Well, I guess the question has to come back to you. What do they want to influence the board about? Right. So if the safety department, and so here's the big, I'm going to back up a bit from this, and I'll come at this question from a different perspective.
Sure.
If a safety department is trying to get buy-in to safety with all of their employees, and let's just say they have 300 employees, which means they probably have maybe 3 people in the safety department. 100 to 200 per. First of all, for 3 people to try and get the buy-in of 300 people, that's an enormous amount of work. And it would take at least, and I'm saying conservatively, a 30-minute conversation with each of them. So if you're having a 30-minute conversation with 100 people, okay, you already got it, right? 3,000 hours. It's astonishing how difficult that is. But Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, The Tipping Point, talked about research from Rensselaer Polytechnic that showed that when 10% of a population holds near and dear an unshakable belief in any one thing, that 10% can become the majority opinion, even though it was founded by a minority of people. And it's because of that unshakable belief, right? People are swayed more by the depths of your convictions than they ever will be the height of your logic. And so safety departments go to their senior managers with logic. And yet it never encompasses anything more than safety. And this is probably, we come back to what we talked about earlier, Christian. This is the challenge, that if you don't know what's happening with the other metrics in the company, that you're not paying attention, that you're not talking to your supervisors, because nobody's better positioned to tell you what's actually going on the floor than the supervisor. What's your pain point, supervisor? And they will tell you what the pain point is. And then as a safety department, we can take that information and go, how does this affect our safety program? Okay, so there's 3 or 4 problems that need to be fixed in order for safety to have a go at it. It's one thing senior managers talk about numbers. They're looking for improvements. They're looking for ways to cut costs. They're looking for any shortcut that they can find in order that it saves them money or makes them money, and preferably a combination of the both. So how does safety drive that? Well, I don't think they do it alone, right? And this is where safety can't be a program unto itself. It has to be part of the collective. Does high levels of attrition affect safety? You bet it does, right? Does high levels of turnover affect safety? You bet it does. New people on the job every day are a higher safety risk. We all know that. And so, how can you go in and say this request for funding for a new project will solve one problem when there are 13 more problems on the floor that they're trying to deal with? And yeah, I'm not arguing that it might solve the problem, but I truly and fervently believe that most safety problems are not money issues or are not awareness issues. They're buy-in issues. And that is in the relationship between supervisor and their frontline teams. And if my values as a supervisor are, I have a strong set of values around safety, guess what? My team is going to adopt those values too. I am the 10%, right? Because they know we always look to our bosses to see what's important to them. If safety is one of the things important to my boss, hey, guess what? It's suddenly important to me.
Perfect. Before we wrap up, Kevin, a bit of a reflexive question for you. You've said you're never going to retire and you love what you do. I mean, what is it that keeps you so driven about this work?
I'm just getting started, Christian.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I really feel that way most days. There is so much to do, and so many things that, well, first of all, we have this new great tool called AI. By the way, it's also a curse, and but if it's used right, we have access to data we have never had access to in as quick as time as we have now. I use it daily, AI. I am not afraid of technology. I love the technology. It helps me to be more efficient. It helps me to help supervisors become more efficient. And, my juice for me is watching a frontline supervisor suddenly have the light bulb go on and go, I never thought about it that way. And when I hear that, man, that is my win. I want to do this again tomorrow. And it's the same thing that I explained to supervisors is, look, you've got to have a reason to celebrate at the end of each day. If you want your people to come back tomorrow, they need to have had a win today. Show them their win. They'll come back tomorrow with motivation. And that's the way I try to find my win. And that's, never retiring. And I think part of it too is everyone around me who's in my age group is retired. And I shouldn't say always, but a good many of them looked at their job as a jail sentence.
Yeah.
That I need to work for 35 years in order before I get my freedom. I look at it the other way. I'm already in my freedom. Having nothing to do, no purpose in the morning would make me crazy. So I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and it's going to be one foot in front of the other and see if we can make a difference in somebody's life today.
Sounds good. I think I'm with you on that one. So thank you so much. If this has resonated with people, if they want to learn more, firstly, what's a good place to kind of follow you or connect? Is it LinkedIn, for example? And then secondly, is there anything in particular you wanted to plug, whether it's a book or a webinar or anything? The floor is yours.
Well, I guess the best place to go would be the website, which is kevburns.com, KEVBURNS. supervisorsrethink.com. Great place to start. LinkedIn, I am on LinkedIn a lot. I've got a YouTube channel, 250 some videos on everything from safety culture at Kev Burns on YouTube. But probably the great place to start for anyone is to invest $20 to find out what the careful supervisor is all about. Everything that we talk about in helping supervisors is in that book.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Made me think lots of things that are going through my mind now in terms of different approaches. So, that's what it's all about for me on the podcast, is trying to introduce some new ideas and get people thinking and lead to the world being safer, like you said. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I'm so appreciative that you reached out, Christian. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And thank you to you as well for joining Kevin and I, and we will see you next week on the podcast. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.